Ooh, like the mic? I sure do. Decided to pull out my recording mic because the other one was getting pretty annoying, and this has much better quality. Alright, so back to the video. The purpose of this video is mainly to clear up common misconceptions about both anarchism and Stirnerite egoism, or at least give my perspective on it and how I use it in terms of theory. There are misconceptions about nearly every ideology or system of theory, no matter what subject you're in, which cause people to look away and form some sort of stupid suppositional view. Kind of like some kid who just came out of browsing Lefty Poll or read Lenin once and instantly subscribes to his view on anarchists and left communists as not knowing what to do or not having any theory, which you'd not only discover as wrong by reading a little into either, but at least in my view shows further how two-dimensional his own theory was, and how he came to that conclusion while comparing it with his own thoughts and when they didn't line up with his jargon. Or maybe the misconceptions of egoism. The thought that egoism is a complete rejection of society for the self, and for one person to put his ego above everything and everyone no matter how others are affected, or the idea that one should simply do whatever they feel like doing no matter the consequences. First on the list, I'm going to try and clear up anarchism. The most simple way to put anarchism is this: the questioning of the legitimacy of all power structures, and to eliminate any power structure which constricts the freedom of the individual beyond reason. This includes rulers placed above the will of community action or personal choice, especially those who, in order to maintain their own authority, must use direct coercion. In this sense, any theory or ideology which keeps this principle in mind can be classified as being anarchistic. Council communism can be anarchistic, syndicalism can be anarchistic, libertarian Marxism can be anarchistic, and so on. What cannot be anarchistic, however, is capitalism, as it requires the unnecessary authority of private property even over the well-being of yourself or others, and requires coercion to constitute its existence, as well as Leninism, Stalinism, and whatever more authoritarian structure you may have. Although Leninists and Stalinists claim to have the same end goals as anarchists, anarchists understand the inherent problems of putting the material interests of some people over others directly, and the inefficiency of representative government to relay the will of the people, thus inherently being grassroots, federalistic, and diagonally organized. Anarchists view the tendencies which attempt to bring emphasis on a supposed necessity for forced power structures as dogmatic. And through the idea that all humans will inevitably take their own economic positions to their own advantage, even a vanguard or democratically elected official, and will attempt to mask their own exploitation with apologetics even to clear up their own consciences while doing so, which is what happens every single time. One semi-problem I may have with anarchist communities is the fact of how general the term anarchism can be used. There are many forms that anarchism can take, and many other things that anarchism can implement while remaining anarchistic, and many things you can add to it to create your own special little snowflake version, many of which I see as either stupid and or unnecessary, but it's not so much in how you'd structure society differently than it is with different aspects of problems which you like to focus on, which would all be equally doable under anarchism to begin with. Another thing that would be annoying to an anarchist, which has to do with how general the term can be used as well, is you can have one person who's read like one book or nothing and doesn't really understand anything about it and just thinks it's cool, and then have some super educated guy who's studied for ages and they'd still fit under the same title, thus making it easy to generalize anarchists as a whole, which is something honestly utterly impossible to do, considering it's more of a structured theory of guidelines for theory which then you can build on than a structured system itself. Moving on to egoism. Egoism is probably a lot easier to explain at this point, considering how nearly identical it is to anarchism, and how you can get most of what egoism is from what I've already stated, but it's more focused on the individual and their own humanity. Within Stirnerite egoism, Stirner argues that the concept of the self is something impossible to fully comprehend, a so-called creative nothing. He describes it as an endpoint of language. Stirner places the self and its interest above what he calls spooks, or ideas or concepts which have no basis in material reality, which are put over and against the interests of the ego to call them to serve it against what would be or is in their own best interest. For example, The idea of humanity or life would be a spook if you were to look down upon killing a tyrant or king because all life is precious and I'm better than that, when they live off of the oppression of thousands and war. The idea of money is a spook because of how people are made to give up all their other causes, such as enjoying life, or healthy communities which help them in return, when they are forced out of necessity to sacrifice their lives for the pursuit of it. Any idea or concept is made a spook if you abstract it from its original purpose and hold it over those who it's made for, such as manipulating the social aspects for the benefit of a few and so on. Even the ideal of communism has been used in such a way that brought a handful of individuals into power and has been used to justify even the most horrendous atrocities against those whose main purpose for being is to better their livelihoods. Gulags, aka slave labor camps for political dissenters or just used as prisons, secret police for detecting enemies of the state, all while the most artfully optimistic and happy-go-lucky propaganda is spewed literally everywhere by the sovereign body to maintain the practically religious abstraction of it beyond reason. Thus is the reason for the emphasis on not making abstractions or values that separate from your actual initial desires of liberation, as they are so easily manipulated to throw you straight back where you began. Even egoism can be made a spook, such as ethical egoism, if you abstract it from its real purpose. The childish misconception of egoism, and Rand could be a good example, is that its main point is that one should detract themselves from all community or not care for anyone simply because community is a spook, when community life is inherently beneficial, as the cooperation between individuals can benefit every individual and the self within it far more than scattered individuals can do on their own. This is what Stirner would have called involuntary egoism, because the egoist is called to be selfish because he ought to, not because he necessarily wants to. It seems unnecessary to delve into logic like that, but it can be very useful in deciphering between values and ideology to find one or discover what best methods could be used to both build a society that is based off of individual benefit from the perspective of each member, and dismantling mindsets of servility to ideas and values which are placed over them, and emphasizing through egoism a form of free association between individuals for the benefit of each member involved. As you can see, anarchism and egoism inherently advocate and complement each other. I hope I've cleared up any misconceptions, or I've at least got a general point across. There is much more to both egoism and anarchism that I have not touched upon, but I made this video mainly to try and clear up the most basic or easy to explain concepts. If you want to know more about either, just read it yourself. I'm not doing whole videos on that.